Mastering difficult conversations. Finding your voice. Introduction. The sterile hum of the fluorescent lights, a sound usually lost in the ambient drone of the office, today felt amplified, a relentless spotlight exposing the fine sheen of perspiration on your upper lip. Mr. Henderson, your superior, was in full oratorical stride, his inquiries descending like a volley of sharp, insistent pebbles. The Peterson report its current standing? That communique to accounting, was it dispatched? And the noon deadline its evasion, the rationale? Each question struck with a dull thud, and your mind, already a frantic vortex of competing demands, strained to keep pace. A familiar constriction tightened in your chest, a primal urge to recede, to offer apologies for transgressions yet to occur, to simply make the onslaught cease. This is a sensation many of us recognize with a chilling familiarity, the creeping dread that heralds an impending, difficult discourse. These moments are not mere isolated incidents. They are recurring motifs in the tapestry of our lives. Whether it is a boss whose expectations are relentless, a colleague perpetually poised to offer unsolicited opinions, or even a family member adept at pressing your most sensitive buttons, certain individuals possess an uncanny ability to render us flustered, unheard, or utterly overwhelmed. They might punctuate your every utterance with interruptions, dismiss your insights with a wave of their hand, or bombard you with a staccato of questions that leave you grasping for equilibrium. It is all too easy to feel cornered, to exist in a perpetual state of defensiveness. Frequently, when confronted with such pressure, our innate inclination is to placate, to smooth the ruffled feathers of the situation. We may find ourselves assenting too readily, evading the word no, or allowing our intonation to ascend at the conclusion of our sentences, as if seeking tacit permission to voice our thoughts. This is the essence of what we term people-pleasing. It is a habit born from a deep-seated desire to circumvent conflict, to be held in high regard, or simply because it represents the familiar cadence of our established behavior. Yet, this well-intentioned habit often results in a profound sense of depletion and a gnawing disrespect for oneself. It is akin to a small, yapping terrier attempting to confront a formidable predator, a flurry of noise, perhaps, but devoid of any genuine authority. The cost of failing to articulate oneself effectively is substantial: opportunities missed, relationships strained, and a persistent undercurrent of anxiety that erodes one's self-assurance. This book is offered as a beacon, illuminating an alternative trajectory. We firmly believe in your inherent capacity to reshape the dynamics of these conversations. The key lies not in escalating volume or aggression, but in cultivating a more profound command over your communication, particularly the very timbre of your voice. Envision the ability to navigate those charged exchanges with an exacting superior or a critical peer, not by shrinking into invisibility, but by firmly establishing your position with an unruffled composure. This volume will guide you in recalibrating your response tempo and vocal inflection, transitioning from the subservience of people-pleasing to the confident assertion of your own presence. It is about discovering your voice, not solely in the lexicon you employ, but in the very resonance of its delivery. At the core of this transformative journey lies a potent communication paradigm known as assertive communication. Consider it the embodiment of equilibrium. It is neither aggressive, characterized by an attempt to dominate others as a yapping terrier might attempt to intimidate, nor is it passive, allowing others to tread upon you as a discarded doormat. Assertive communication champions mutual respect for oneself and respect for others. It empowers you to articulate your thoughts, feelings, and needs with clarity, devoid of rudeness or imperiousness. It is about exuding strength and precision, much like a placid, grounded gorilla, yet without any hint of aggression. A critical component of this mastery involves the deliberate control of your voice. When assailed by a barrage of rapid-fire inquiries, rather than reflexively mirroring their velocity, you possess the agency to respond with measured deliberation, employing a steady, resonant tone. This intentional modulation signals your self-possession, your cognitive engagement, and your refusal to be hurried or intimidated. In the ensuing chapters, we shall meticulously dissect the cultivation of this formidable skill. We will delve into the intricacies of recognizing your personal communication triggers, mastering the nuanced art of vocal modulation from cadence to pitch, and confidently navigating those precarious conversations. You will acquire practical methodologies designed to alleviate stress and enhance your sense of control, thereby transforming your interactions from dreaded encounters into opportunities for clear, respectful dialogue. Are you prepared to cease shrinking and commence speaking? To transmute your most formidable conversations into moments where your voice commands attention and earns respect? Then turn the page and let us embark upon the journey of mastering your difficult conversations, one potent word, one assured intonation at a time. Chapter 1. Navigating Tough Conversations. 1. Dealing with Difficult Bosses. Imagine this: your boss, let's call her Ms. Thorne, possesses a communication style akin to a rapid-fire barrage. She might sweep into your office unannounced or summon you without preamble, unleashing a torrent of questions. Have you completed the report? Why the delay? What is the impediment? And what of the client call? Were the details confirmed? I require this by noon, without exception. It's an assault. Your pulse quickens. A familiar clench tightens your chest, and before coherent thought can form, you're scrambling for answers, your voice ascending at the end of each utterance, as if seeking leave to speak. Yes, Ms. Thorne, the report I am merely putting the finishing touches on it. I shall deliver it to you. Did confirm the call details. You feel yourself diminish, yearning for invisibility. This is a common tableau, is it not? Many of us have experienced this, ensnared in the tempest of a superior who seems to operate on a vastly different, more accelerated, and demanding frequency. This high-frequency communication from a superior is not always born of deliberate malice, yet its effect is often remarkably similar. It compels defensiveness. It is engineered, consciously or not, to catch one off guard. When an individual bombards you with swift inquiries or pressing demands, your innate inclination is to react with equal celerity. You may experience a surge of panic, an overwhelming impulse to justify yourself, to apologize, or to pledge improvement, all in an effort to placate and avert further discord. This is the quintessential people-pleaser reflex. Your vocal pitch might rise slightly, your tone becomes somewhat breathy, and the conclusion of your sentences may even ascend, as if posing a query rather than articulating a statement. So, I will have it completed by then? You might inquire, even as you are meant to be confirming a deadline. This vocal cadence betrays uncertainty, a yearning for validation, or a deficit of confidence. It is akin to a diminutive, yapping canine attempting to capture the attention of a much larger creature, hoping its frantic energy will be overlooked. But what if you possessed the agency to select a different response? What if, rather than being trapped in that frenetic cycle, you could fundamentally alter the entire dynamic? This is the locus of assertive communication, a principle of profound efficacy when confronting challenging superiors. Assertive communication, as previously elucidated, is predicated on mutual respect. It entails articulating one's thoughts and needs with clarity and composure, eschewing aggression or passivity. When Ms. Thorne unleashes her interrogations, your objective is neither to retaliate nor to capitulate meekly. It is to respond with a controlled, assured presence. The most potent strategy in this scenario is to deliberately recalibrate your own communication frequency. Conceive of it as tuning a radio. Ms. Thorne is transmitting on a high, urgent frequency. Your instinct is to align your receiver to the same station. But what if you could attune to a different, more stable frequency? This necessitates a conscious deceleration of your response cadence and a lowering of your vocal pitch. When she inquires, "Why is it late?" rather than launching into an immediate, flustered explanation, you inhale deeply. You pause. You might even take a sip of water if one is at hand. Then you speak. And you speak at a more deliberate pace, with a steady, lower timbre. The report is in its final stages, Ms. Thorne. I am presently cross-referencing the data points. I anticipate submitting it to you by state a realistic, specific time. Do you perceive the distinction? The pause cultivates an oasis of calm. The slower pace signals thoughtful deliberation, not mere reaction. The lower, steady tone conveys command and self-possession. It is the difference between the frenetic flutter of a hummingbird's wings and the measured, powerful beat of an eagle's. Both possess potency, yet one feels chaotic, the other, majestic and in control. This deliberate modulation of your vocal frequency is paramount. It disrupts the superior's established pattern. When you respond with haste and an upward inflection, you implicitly validate their urgency and their unspoken criticism. You are, in essence, communicating, "Yes, I am stressed, I am struggling, please rescue me from this predicament." Conversely, when you decelerate and lower your pitch, you convey an entirely different message. You are stating, "I acknowledge your concern. I am managing this situation. I am in command of my work and my response." This does not imply rudeness or dismissiveness. It signifies a conscious choice to be assertive, neither aggressively confrontational like a yapping terrier, nor passively submissive like a sycophant. Your aim is the serene, grounded fortitude of a silverback gorilla, not to intimidate, but to embody a steadfast, unyielding presence. Let us delve more deeply into those people-pleaser vocal tendencies. The upward inflection at the conclusion of a sentence is a significant marker. When you utter, "I'll have it to you by noon," it suggests a hopeful uncertainty, an implicit request for approval, to meet the very deadline that was just imposed. It erodes the authority of your declaration. Contrast this with a firm, downward inflection, "I'll have it to you by noon." This statement is unequivocal, confident, and definitive. It is an affirmation, not an interrogation. Other vocal indicators that can betray people-pleasing include speaking too softly, employing a breathy tone, or rushing your words in an effort to articulate them before further interruption. These all communicate a deficiency in self-assurance and a susceptibility to being easily swayed or disregarded. So, how does one consciously modify these ingrained habits, particularly when under duress? It requires diligent practice, commencing with heightened awareness. The initial step is recognizing the manifestation of these behaviors. When Ms. Thorne initiates her rapid-fire questioning, attune yourself to your own physical and vocal responses. Do you feel your shoulders tense? Does your breathing become shallow? Does your voice ascend? Awareness is the bedrock. Once you have cultivated this awareness, you can begin to practice the transition. This is not about adopting a persona. It is about cultivating a new, more effective communication habit. Consider it akin to acquiring proficiency in a musical instrument. One does not expect to perform a symphony on the inaugural attempt. One commences with scales, with elementary exercises. Here is a method for practicing the different frequency response. 1. The breath anchor. Prior to responding to a demanding superior, inhale slowly and deeply. Draw air through your nostrils, expanding your abdomen, and exhale deliberately through your mouth. This simple act soothes your nervous system and affords you a moment to marshal your thoughts. It serves as a physical anchor, facilitating a pause. 2. The pause power. Following your breath, consciously introduce a pause before you speak. Allow the silence to linger for a second or two. This pause is not awkward, it is potent. It signifies that you are processing information, not merely reacting. It grants you the temporal space to select your words and your tone. 3. The tone tune down. As you commence speaking, deliberately lower your pitch. Envision your voice as a dial and you are reducing its setting by a notch or two. Focus on vocalizing from your diaphragm rather than solely from your throat. This engenders a richer, more resonant, and lower vocal quality. 4. The pace slow down. Deliberately reduce your speaking velocity. Articulate your words with clarity. This does not imply speaking at a pace so glacial as to sound unnatural, but rather finding a measured rhythm that allows your message to be conveyed and comprehended without a sense of undue haste. Let us revisit the analytical queries to deepen our comprehension. Beyond pitch, what specific vocal cues can signal a people-pleasing response to a superior, and how can these be consciously modified? In addition to an ascending pitch, people-pleasing vocalizations can encompass breathiness, a voice that sounds airy or lacking in substance. This frequently occurs when anxiety leads to shallow breathing. To counteract this, concentrate on diaphragmatic respiration. When you speak, feel the air emanating from your abdomen, not merely your chest. This will inherently imbue your voice with greater substance and resonance. Instead of a hesitant "I'll try," aim for a more resolute "I will." Hesitation and stuttering, the habitual use of filler words such as like, or initiating sentences only to restart them. This indicates uncertainty and a lack of preparedness. To mitigate this, embrace the pause. The pause is your ally. It is preferable to a brief silence than a cascade of filler words. Practice articulating your thoughts internally before vocalizing them. Volume fluctuations. Your voice may diminish in volume when you feel intimidated or escalate when you feel defensive. A consistent, moderate volume is essential for assertiveness. If you notice your voice trailing off, consciously project slightly more, as if addressing someone across a small room. Rapid speech. As previously discussed, accelerating your speech is a symptom of anxiety and a desire to conclude the interaction swiftly. Slowing down is the antidote. Make a deliberate effort to enunciate each word distinctly. The key to altering these tendencies lies in consistent, conscious practice. You can refine these techniques in low-stakes environments initially. Practice them when conversing with friends, family, or even when ordering a beverage. Record yourself speaking. Listen back and identify these vocal tells. Subsequently, consciously endeavor to slow your pace, lower your pitch, and speak with a steadier volume. When you find yourself in a meeting with your superior, and you sense that familiar surge of anxiety, recall your breath anchor, your pause, and your tone tune down. It may feel somewhat unnatural at first, akin to wearing new footwear, but with practice, it will evolve into your default, confident mode of communication. How can a reader internalize the different frequency response so that it feels natural rather than contrived or performative, particularly when subjected to pressure from a demanding superior? Internalizing this skill is about transforming it into a habit, not a theatrical display. Consider it analogous to learning to drive. Initially, one must meticulously attend to every detail, checking mirrors, signaling, braking, accelerating. It demands considerable conscious effort. However, with sustained practice, driving becomes intuitive. You perform it without conscious thought. The same principle applies to assertive communication. 1. Begin incrementally and build momentum. Do not reserve the application of your newfound skills for a high-stakes confrontation with your superior. Practice them in everyday exchanges. When a friend poses the question, "What do you fancy for dinner?" Instead of a swift, uncertain "whatever you wish," try a more deliberate, "I am open to suggestions, but I was considering Italian tonight. How does that strike you?" This employs a slightly more measured pace and a more considered tone. 2. Role-playing. Engage in practice sessions with a trusted friend or family member. Request that they assume the role of your demanding superior, barraging you with rapid inquiries. You, in turn, practice your breath control, your pause, and your tone tune down. This simulated pressure can bolster your confidence for real-world scenarios. 3. Mental rehearsal. Prior to a potentially challenging conversation with your superior, dedicate a few minutes to mental preparation. Visualize yourself within the situation. Picture yourself taking a breath, pausing, and responding with composure and assertiveness. Imagine a positive resolution. This mental conditioning can significantly alleviate anxiety and enhance your performance. 4. Focus on the sensation of control. As you practice, pay attention to the internal sensation when you adopt an assertive response. Note the feeling of tranquility, the sense of being in command of yourself and the circumstances. This positive reinforcement is a potent motivator. As you experience greater control, the behavior becomes more ingrained. It ceases to feel like a performance and begins to feel like an authentic expression of yourself. 5. Self-compassion. There will be occasions when you falter. You may revert to old patterns under extreme duress. Do not berate yourself for these lapses. Acknowledge them, learn from them, and recommit to your practice. This journey is about progress, not flawlessness. Each instance where you opt for a more assertive response reinforces that new neural pathway within your brain and body. When Ms. Thorne inquires, "Why is this report tardy?" "I require it immediately." Your practiced response might be, "Inhale deeply." Ms. Thorne, "The report is in the process of finalization." 2. Managing challenging interactions. When confronted with an individual exhibiting difficult behavior, their rapid-fire delivery can be disorienting. They might inundate you with a barrage of questions, each one a relentless follow-up to the last, or interject with jarring interruptions. This onslaught can induce a sense of urgency, confusion, and an overwhelming compulsion to respond instantaneously. It is akin to being on a runaway train, desperately trying to maintain equilibrium. This accelerated tempo is frequently employed, sometimes even unconsciously, to destabilize you, to erode your sense of control over the discourse. Consider the archetype of a demanding superior, whose urgent requisitions descend upon you like a deluge. They might decree, "I require this report by noon, and concurrently, could you investigate that client anomaly?" Furthermore, do not neglect preparations for the 2 p.m. assembly. What is the current standing of the budget proposal? Should you attempt to address each query as it arises, mirroring their frenetic cadence, you may find yourself faltering, discomposed, and perhaps even acquiescing to commitments that defy practical realization. Your vocal pitch might ascend toward the conclusion of your sentences, creating an impression of seeking permission to speak, or of profound uncertainty. This is the manifestation of the people-pleaser reflex, a common reaction when we perceive ourselves under duress. The immediate physiological and cognitive repercussions of such rapid-fire communication can be substantial. Your heart rate may accelerate. A constriction in your chest or a knot in your stomach might manifest. Your mind can race, struggling to assimilate the influx of information and to formulate a coherent rejoinder. This state of heightened stress impedes clarity of thought. You may find yourself uttering yes to circumvent confrontation, even at the cost of self-imposed overexertion. Your cognitive faculties become fixated on immediate survival, on de-escalating the perceived threat posed by the difficult individual's intensity rather than on considered, strategic communication. It is precisely here that the power of pace and pause reveals its efficacy. The fundamental strategy involves consciously decelerating your own response. This is not an endorsement of sluggish comprehension or a passive posture that suggests inattentiveness. Rather, it is about cultivating a deliberate interval between the reception of a question and the delivery of an answer. Envision yourself handling a fragile glass object. You would not simply relinquish it, you would place it down with meticulous care. Similarly, by moderating your response, you are carefully positioning your words, imbuing them with greater weight and consideration. This deliberate slowness communicates that you are in command, that you are engaged in cogitation, and that you will not be coerced into a hasty or ill-considered reply. It is a means of reclaiming your agency within the conversational dynamic. When confronted with a rapid succession of inquiries, rather than responding to each one with immediate alacrity, you can consciously inhale. You can permit yourself a brief interlude. This pause, though it may feel protracted to you, is often perceived by the other party as indicative of thoughtful deliberation. You might articulate, "Allow me a moment to collect my thoughts on that matter." Alternatively, if the questions are distinct, you could acknowledge their entirety before offering a response. For instance, "So, you are inquiring about the report deadline, the client issue, the preparations for the 2 p.m. meeting, and the status of the budget proposal. I can address those." Subsequently, you may elect to respond to them sequentially, but at your own measured pace. This deliberate deceleration directly counteracts the difficult individual's endeavor to overwhelm you. Their speed is a calculated tactic, and by mirroring it, you inadvertently fall into their snare. By consciously decelerating, you disrupt their established rhythm. You demonstrate that you will not be swept away by their manufactured urgency. This does not imply a lack of responsiveness. Rather, it signifies a strategically responsive approach. You are dictating the timing and manner of your engagement, rather than being compelled into it. It is analogous to a seasoned martial artist who eschews meeting force with commensurate force, opting instead to redirect it. By slowing your pace, you subtly redirect the conversational momentum. This leads us to the vocal dimension, specifically the concept of the hump and the downward inflection. The hump does not refer to the literal production of a sound resembling a hump. It signifies a subtle modulation in the delivery of your response, often involving a brief pause or a shift in emphasis that lends your answer a greater sense of completeness and considered thought. Consider it an infusion of thoughtful gravitas into your pronouncements. When you respond with undue haste, your sentences can become conflated, sounding rushed. The hump acts as a gentle deceleration, granting your statement a sense of finality and import. More critically, we must address the conclusion of your sentences. Have you observed how, when experiencing uncertainty or striving for conciliation, your voice tends to ascend at the end of a declarative statement? It transforms a statement into a query even when conveying information. For instance, instead of asserting, "I can complete that by Friday," you might inadvertently articulate, "I can complete that by Friday." This rising inflection is a quintessential marker of the people pleaser, seeking validation or attempting to soften an assertion to avoid appearing overly assertive. It betrays uncertainty and invites further interrogation or challenge. It is, in essence, an unspoken plea. Please confirm that this is acceptable. To counteract this tendency, we must embrace a downward vocal inflection. This entails allowing your voice to naturally descend at the close of a statement, rather than ascending. Instead of the tentative "I can complete that by Friday," you articulate with assuredness, "I can complete that by Friday." This seemingly minor alteration in vocal timbre conveys authority, conviction, and a sense of closure. It communicates, "This is within my capacity," or "This is my position," devoid of apology or hesitation. It is a potent instrument for asserting one's presence. Consider the analogy of a gorilla. A gorilla possesses formidable strength and can be imposing, yet it does not typically engage in aggressive barking or shrieking. Unlike a small, yapping canine, a gorilla stands its ground, it is present, and it communicates with a certain gravitas. Assertive communication, in this context, mirrors the gorilla. It is about being strong and clear, but with a measured and controlled demeanor. It is not about aggression, which is akin to the barking chihuahua that attempts to intimidate through noise and frantic energy. Nor is it about passivity, exemplified by the people pleaser whose voice ascends, seeking approbation. Assertive communication resides in finding that equipoise, that confident, steady presence. The people pleaser reflex is deeply ingrained in many of us. We are conditioned to be agreeable, to eschew conflict, and to prioritize the happiness of others. However, in the crucible of difficult conversations, this reflex can prove detrimental. When a demanding individual exerts pressure, our immediate inclination may be to placate, to concur, to offer excessive explanations, or to apologize for transgressions that are not our responsibility. Recognizing these ingrained patterns is the inaugural step toward their transformation. When you detect yourself accelerating your speech, or your voice beginning to rise at the conclusion of your sentences, that is your signal. That is the juncture at which to consciously elect a different response. Rather than launching into an elaborate justification for your inability to fulfill an unreasonable request, you can employ a concise, direct statement with a downward inflection. For instance, if your supervisor assigns you an additional project when your workload is already at capacity, instead of proposing, "Oh, well, I'm really swamped with X, Y, and Z right now, and I'm not sure I can fit it in, perhaps if I stayed late." Note the rising pitch and the eagerness to please. You could articulate, "I understand you require this project to be completed. However, my current workload does not permit me to undertake additional tasks at this time." Observe the steady cadence and the downward inflection. This is assertive. It is unambiguous, respectful of the request, yet it firmly delineates your reality without apology. Beyond vocal cues, other nonverbal signals play a pivotal role in either reinforcing or undermining your assertive communication. Your posture, for example, can either project confidence or betray nervousness. Standing or sitting erect, with your shoulders relaxed but drawn back, conveys a sense of groundedness. Slouching or hunching your shoulders can make you appear timid or defensive, even if your words are assertive. Maintaining comfortable eye contact is also crucial. Avoiding eye contact can suggest dishonesty or a lack of self-assurance, while an intense stare can be perceived as aggressive. The objective is a steady, respectful gaze that signifies your presence and engagement. Facial expressions constitute another potent nonverbal instrument. A neutral, composed expression communicates equanimity. A furrowed brow or a clenched jaw can indicate tension or displeasure, while a forced smile may appear disingenuous. When practicing assertive communication, aim for a calm, open facial expression that harmonizes with the steady tone of your voice. This holistic approach, integrating controlled vocal delivery with confident bodily comportment, crafts a powerful message of self-possession. Let us consider how the specific pacing and tonal delivery of a difficult individual engineer a psychological advantage. When someone speaks with rapidity, they are frequently endeavoring to instill a sense of urgency and pressure. This speed can overwhelm our working memory, thereby impeding our capacity to process information, evaluate alternatives, or formulate a coherent response. It can trigger our fight-or-flight mechanism, leading to anxiety, defensiveness, or a desire to extricate oneself from the situation. This is particularly true if the difficult person's tone is also sharp, strident, or accusatory. These elements coalesce to create an environment wherein the recipient feels assailed and is less inclined to engage in critical thought or articulate their own needs. For instance, imagine a customer service representative interacting with an irate patron who is shouting and speaking with extreme rapidity. The customer might exclaim, "I demand to speak with a manager immediately. This is utterly unacceptable. I require a full refund without delay." The representative, feeling the pressure of the vociferations and the accelerated pace, may become flustered. Their own voice might rise in pitch as they attempt to interject or elucidate company policy. They may begin to feel defensive, contemplating, "This is not my fault." This rapid, aggressive delivery from the customer is designed to bypass rational thought and provoke an emotional reaction, thereby diminishing the representative's ability to adhere to protocol or offer a tranquil resolution. By consciously decelerating your response, you interrupt this detrimental cycle. You create a vital buffer. This buffer permits your prefrontal cortex, the region of your brain responsible for rational thought and decision-making, to engage. When you pause, you afford yourself the temporal latitude to process what has been conveyed, to contemplate your options, and to select a response that aligns with your objectives, rather than one dictated by the other person's emotional state or rapid cadence. This pause also signals to the difficult individual that you are not easily intimidated or rushed. It subtly reconfigures the power dynamic. They may persist with their rapid pace momentarily, but if you consistently respond with measured calm and an unwavering voice, their intensity often begins to diminish. This is where strategic response archetypes prove exceptionally valuable. Instead of being ensnared in the dichotomy of aggressive retaliation, the barking chihuahua, or passive appeasement, the uncertain, ascending voice, you can elect to embody the assertive gorilla. This entails being firm, clear, and direct, yet invariably respectful. It is about articulating your needs and boundaries without attacking the other person. For example, if a colleague consistently offloads their unfinished tasks upon you at the 11th hour, an aggressive response might be, "That is your responsibility. Handle it yourself." A passive response could be, "Oh, all right, I suppose I can attempt to squeeze it in." An assertive response, delivered with a steady voice and a downward inflection, might be, "I understand you are under considerable pressure. However, I am unable to undertake this task today as I have my own deadlines to meet. Perhaps we can discuss more effective workload management strategies in the future." This assertive approach represents the very essence of controlling your communication. It is about acknowledging that while you cannot dictate the other person's behavior, you possess absolute dominion over your own response. You can dictate your pace. You can dictate your tone. You can dictate your words. This capacity for choice is where your power resides. It transforms you from a victim of contentious exchanges into a proficient navigator. By mastering the subtle art of regulating your response pace and vocal timbre, you transition from a reactive participant to a strategic communicator. This newfound command not only dissipates immediate tension, but also establishes the foundation for more profound transformations in how you approach and influence future interactions. Now that we have elucidated the methodology for managing the flow of a difficult conversation. 3. Effective communication strategies. Navigating the tempestuous currents of difficult conversations can feel akin to weathering a sudden squall. You might find yourself confronting a superior whose questions rain down with relentless rapidity, or a peer whose every utterance seems a veiled assault. In such moments, the inclination to capitulate, to nod in agreement with every assertion, or to lash out defensively, is potent. But what if you possessed the capacity to steer the dialogue rather than be swept away by its torrent? This is precisely where the profound influence of your vocal delivery reveals its true brilliance. It is not merely the lexicon you select, but the very cadence and timbre with which you imbue your words. Consider the approach of a demanding manager. They might lean forward, their voice sharp and clipped, unleashing a volley of interrogatories. What precisely did you accomplish today? Why remains this report unfinished? Did you even engage with Sarah regarding the project status? This accelerated tempo is no accident. It is a calculated stratagem to engender pressure, to foster a sense of urgent scrambling for responses, and to provoke an unthinking reaction. Your cognitive faculties may race, struggling to keep pace, and before you can marshal your thoughts, you find yourself assenting to untenable commitments or uttering words you later regret. This is the precipice where the compulsion to people please can seize control. Your vocal pitch might ascend towards the conclusion of your sentences, transforming declarative statements into tentative queries, as if seeking tacit permission to speak or absolution for perceived imperfections. It is akin to the anxious yapping of a small terrier, striving for audibility but largely conveying a palpable unease. Yet, herein lies the revelation. You possess the inherent power to recalibrate this tempo. You can elect not to mirror their frenetic rhythm. When your superior unleashes a barrage of questions, rather than precipitously offering answers, draw a deliberate breath. Consciously decelerate your response. This is not an exhibition of intellectual sluggishness. It is an act of considered deliberation. It is akin to engaging a pause button amidst a high-octane contest. This interlude cultivates a vital space. It affords you a crucial moment to marshal your thoughts, to meticulously select your verbiage, and to ensure your reply is a product of thoughtful consideration, not mere reflexive reaction. This deliberate deceleration projects a potent message. You are the conductor of your communication. You are not being coerced or cornered. It is a silent declaration. I have registered your concerns, and I shall respond, but I shall do so on my own terms. This constitutes a cornerstone of assertive communication, the reclamation of your personal cadence. This intentional slowing of speech may initially feel incongruous. You might harbor anxieties that others will perceive you as inattentive or ill-informed. However, the inverse is frequently the case. When your discourse unfolds at a measured pace, your pronouncements acquire greater gravitas. They resonate with a sense of considered thought and assuredness. The distinction is analogous to the difference between a shallow, turbulent brook and a deep, unwavering river. The river flows with an undeniable power, a serene majesty, its presence indubitable. Your voice, too, can embody this riverine quality. Instead of feeling submerged beneath a deluge of inquiries, you can emerge as the steadying force that navigates the conversational flow. Beyond the temporal dimension, the very tone of your voice represents another instrument of formidable influence. Reflect upon your vocalizations when grappling with uncertainty or striving for conciliation. Frequently, the terminal inflection of our sentences ascends, transforming them into interrogatives. So, you require this by tomorrow, correct? Or, I shall endeavor to complete it, all right? This upward lilt is a quintessential marker of people-pleasing tendencies. It betrays a lack of conviction, a yearning for affirmation, and an underlying insecurity. It diminishes your perceived self-possession and can inadvertently invite further pressure from your interlocutor. Now, envision an alternative tonal landscape. A timbre that is stable, grounded, and concludes with a decisive, downward inflection. When you articulate, "I shall complete this by tomorrow," and your voice settles on a firm note, it registers as a statement of fact, a commitment. It is not a question, it is an affirmation. This downward inflection conveys assurance, authority, and a sense of finality. It is the sonic signature of one who comprehends the import of their words and stands resolutely behind them. This is the resonance of the gorilla in our conceptual framework, strong, composed, and in command. It eschews the stridency of an aggressive chihuahua for the grounded clarity of a confident presence. The transition to a modified tone might initially feel performative, but like any acquired skill, it gains fluidity with consistent application. You can commence by practicing in low-stakes environments. When ordering a beverage, instead of a hesitant, upwardly inflected, "A latte, please," try a more definitive, "A latte, please," with a clear, descending finality. Observe the qualitative difference in the sensation. Subsequently, integrate this practice into conversations with friends about your day. "I experienced a demanding day," delivered with a steady cadence, rather than "I experienced a demanding day," with a rising pitch. The more you cultivate this downward inflection, the more it will feel intrinsically natural. When engaged in a challenging dialogue, you can consciously access this more assured tone, even amidst internal apprehension. It serves as a conduit for projecting the composure and control you aspire to embody. To truly master the art of difficult conversations, a profound understanding of these distinct communication paradigms is imperative. Coupled with a conscious selection of our posture, we frequently fall into habitual patterns without conscious awareness. Some among us may manifest as the aforementioned barking chihuahua, quick to react, perhaps vociferous, but not invariably effective. We might adopt a defensive stance, speak with undue haste, and attempt to assert ourselves in a manner perceived as aggressive. This approach often proves counterproductive, eliciting defensiveness in the other party and escalating the conflict. Conversely, a significant portion of individuals defaults to the people-pleaser persona akin to a timid rodent. We might modulate our voice to a lower register, eschew direct eye contact, and acquiesce to demands merely to maintain harmony. Our vocalizations may trail off or ascend at their conclusion, signaling our discomfort and readiness to accommodate. This is the very vulnerability that a demanding manager can readily exploit, as we fail to establish any discernible boundaries. The ultimate objective, as previously elucidated, is to embody the gorilla, not a rampaging, belligerent primate, but a sagacious, commanding silverback. Envision a creature that is serene, firmly rooted, and commands deference through its sheer presence, not through overt aggression. This gorilla posture in communication signifies assertiveness. It empowers you to articulate your needs, express your sentiments, and delineate boundaries with clarity and unwavering respect. You can unequivocally decline when necessary and solicit what you require without succumbing to guilt. This equilibrium is achieved through the harmonious interplay of measured pacing and a confident, steady tone. It is an expression of strength and lucidity, always tempered by a profound respect for oneself and for the other individual. This brings us to the nuanced discipline of the deliberate pause. It transcends mere vocal deceleration. It represents the strategic deployment of silence. In an exchange characterized by rapid-fire volleys, silence can evoke discomfort, even awkwardness. However, for the individual intentionally employing a pause, it becomes a moment of potent influence. When your superior inundates you with a cascade of questions, rather than responding to each as it is posed, you can inhale deeply and pause. This interlude is not an indication of ignorance or indecision. It is a signal that you are actively processing the information, that you are meticulously selecting your response, and that you will not be unduly hurried. Consider this: when presented with a complex query and you immediately discharge an answer, it may not represent your most considered or effective reply. However, if you allow for a brief interval of contemplation, gather your thoughts, and then articulate your response, it will invariably be more lucid, more insightful, and more impactful. This pause can also exert a calming influence on the other party. If they are accustomed to your immediate reactions, your deliberate silence may prompt them to pause and reflect as well. It disrupts the habitual cycle of instantaneous reaction and response. This strategic employment of silence affords you the opportunity to consciously refine your pace and tone. You can leverage that interlude to remind yourself to speak more slowly, to lower your vocal register, and to conclude your sentences with a downward inflection. It functions as a mental reset mechanism. It is a means of regaining your equilibrium and ensuring that your communication emanates from a position of strength, rather than from a place of stress. The pause is your indispensable ally in reclaiming dominion over the conversational dynamic. It is a quiet yet formidable assertion of your presence. Let us consider Sarah, an employee who labored under the tutelage of a particularly demanding manager, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison had a propensity for summoning Sarah to his office precisely as she was preparing to depart at the close of the workday. He would then initiate a series of urgent directives and criticisms, all delivered at a breakneck velocity. "Sarah, I require those figures by morning. Did you procure the client feedback? Why languishes this proposal on your desk? I presumed you were overseeing this matter." Sarah would invariably experience a tightening in her abdomen. Her voice would ascend, and she would commence a stammered litany of apologies and assurances. "Yes, Mr. Harrison, I shall furnish the figures. I am presently engaged with the client feedback. I shall elevate the proposal to the apex of my priorities. I am profoundly apologetic." She would depart his office feeling depleted and inadequate, frequently compelled to remain late to endeavor to meet his unachievable expectations. Subsequent to absorbing the principles of controlling pace and tone, Sarah resolved to implement a divergent strategy. The ensuing occasion Mr. Harrison summoned her. He commenced his customary rapid-fire interrogation. Sarah drew a profound breath and, eschewing immediate response, allowed a pause to intercede. She permitted the silence to linger for a brief interval, just long enough for Mr. Harrison to regard her with a modicum of surprise. Then she spoke, not with her customary hurried, upward inflection, but with deliberate slowness and a steady, downward cadence. "Harrison," she began, her voice imbued with calm clarity, "I acknowledge your requirement for the figures by morning. I am presently engaged with the client feedback, and I shall attend to the proposal immediately thereafter." Observe the distinct character of her reply. She acknowledged his request, but she did not offer immediate capitulation. She articulated her current actions and her subsequent intentions with straightforward factualness. Her voice did not ascend at its conclusion. It was a declaration, not a supplication. Mr. Harrison, accustomed to Sarah's immediate compliance and flustered apologies, appeared momentarily disoriented. He paused for a beat, then simply nodded. "Very well, Sarah. Ensure it is completed." Sarah exited his office not with a sense of depletion, but with a quiet triumph. She had leveraged her voice, her pace, and her tone to assert her presence and manage the interaction without recourse to people-pleasing. Over the ensuing weeks, Sarah persisted in this practice. She cultivated the habit of employing deliberate pauses before responding, decelerating her speech, and maintaining a steady, downward tonal trajectory. She observed that Mr. Harrison's demands, while still extant, felt less overwhelming. She was able to articulate her workload with clarity and establish realistic expectations, all through the mastery of her vocal mechanics. She was not aggressive, she was assertive. She was not a timid creature, she was a calm, assured presence. This metamorphosis in communication style is not an endorsement of rudeness or aggression. It is an affirmation of clarity and a profound respect for one's own needs. When you govern your pace, you are not exhibiting sluggishness, you are demonstrating thoughtfulness. When you regulate your tone, you are not exhibiting aggression, you are projecting confidence. These are the foundational elements of assertive communication, enabling you to maintain your stance without succumbing to the impulse to retreat or to attack. The paramount takeaway is that your voice is an instrument, and like any instrument, its utility can be maximized or diminished. By consciously electing to decelerate your pace and modulate your tone, you can fundamentally transform your approach to navigating challenging conversations. You can transition from a position of being a victim of external pressure to becoming the architect of your own communicative landscape. This deliberate command over your vocal delivery represents a significant stride toward discovering your authentic voice and mastering those demanding interactions. However, the efficacy of communication is not solely contingent upon how we articulate, but equally upon the lucidity and conviction of what we convey. The deliberate modulation of our voice can only achieve so much if the underlying message itself is nebulous or uncertain. Therefore, the subsequent critical juncture involves ensuring that our words carry the same weight and assurance as our vocal delivery. This leads us to the indispensable skill of crafting your assertive message, wherein we shall endeavor to articulate our thoughts and requirements with precision and impactful resonance. 4. Vocal techniques for clarity. In the crucible of a challenging dialogue, our voices can become unwitting saboteurs. We may find ourselves speaking with a frantic cadence, our words spilling forth in a torrent, or our intonation climbing towards the end of sentences, betraying an undercurrent of uncertainty. This is not a reflection of flawed communication skills, but rather a primal human response to duress. Yet, the encouraging truth is that these vocal tendencies are amenable to cultivation. We can retrain our voices to serve as steadfast allies, rather than adversaries, in those critical junctures where our presence must be felt. It is here that the tangible alchemy of assertive communication truly manifests, extending its influence beyond the mere substance of our discourse to the very manner of its conveyance. Recall a moment when you were inundated with a rapid-fire barrage of questions, perhaps from a demanding superior or an insistent colleague. Your immediate inclination might be to mirror their velocity, to dispatch answers with the same alacrity with which queries were posed. But what is the consequence of such a reaction? Your thoughts become ensnared, your articulation falters, you may utter regrettable words, or simply feel submerged by the pressure. It is akin to attempting to capture a handful of marbles hurled at breakneck speed. Most will inevitably elude your grasp. This is the juncture where the inaugural, and arguably most potent, vocal stratagem emerges, the dominion of pace. When an individual speaks with undue haste, it often signals an acute sense of urgency, occasionally even impatience. Our innate reaction is to accelerate our own speech, to synchronize with their rhythm, thereby demonstrating engagement and comprehension. However, this can prove counterproductive. An accelerated delivery can render our pronouncements hurried and diminish their perceived significance. It can project an image of discomposure, as if we are struggling to remain afloat. Our listeners may not have adequate time to fully process our meaning, leading to misinterpretations. They might even construe our haste as a manifestation of defensiveness or trepidation rather than assuredness. The remedy? A conscious and deliberate deceleration of your speaking tempo. This is not an invitation to speak so languidly as to induce tedium, but rather to discover a measured, unwavering rhythm. Envision yourself as a seasoned conductor, guiding an orchestra. You do not hasten the tempo merely because the music is exhilarating. You command it, allowing each note to resonate with its full import. When you decelerate, you project a powerful signal. You communicate to yourself and to your interlocutor that you are in command. You are composed. You are contemplating. This interlude, this subtle reduction in speed, grants your cognitive faculties precious moments to organize your thoughts, to select your words with discernment, and to formulate a response that is both lucid and coherent. It is, in essence, engaging a mental pause button. This intentional slowing of speech achieves two pivotal outcomes. Firstly, it empowers you to think before you speak. Instead of reacting impulsively, you are responding thoughtfully. You gain the capacity to consider the query, to appraise the situation, and to select the most efficacious method for articulating your perspective. Secondly, it fundamentally alters the listener's perception of you. A more measured, deliberate pace conveys an aura of confidence and authority. It suggests a lack of fluster, an assured grasp of the circumstances, and that your contribution merits careful delivery. It is the auditory equivalent of drawing a deep, steadying breath before commencing. When you speak at a tempo that feels both comfortable and controlled, your message lands with amplified impact. It is unambiguous, considered, and significantly more challenging for another to interrupt or overwhelm. Now, let us turn our attention to pitch and inflection. This is an area where many individuals, particularly those inclined towards people-pleasing, often falter without conscious awareness. Have you ever observed how, when posing a question, your voice naturally ascends toward the conclusion? Are you comfortable with this arrangement? Voice rises. This is an intrinsic element of seeking information. However, when this upward inflection is applied to declarative statements, especially when endeavoring to assert oneself or articulate a need, it can utterly undermine the integrity of our message. It transmutes a statement into an inquiry, a declaration into a supplication. It signals a lack of conviction, as though we are soliciting permission to possess our own thoughts or sentiments. It is tantamount to saying, "This is my perspective, but please confirm if I am mistaken." This ascending vocal trajectory at the end of a sentence is a classic hallmark of people-pleasing behavior. It is a vocal tic that communicates, "I lack complete self-assurance. I require validation." In the context of a difficult conversation, this can prove disastrous. If you are attempting to establish a boundary, voice a concern, or articulate a request, and your voice rises at the conclusion, your counterpart may not perceive your statement as a firm demarcation, but rather as an open invitation to negotiate or dismiss it. They may not register your concern as a matter of gravity, but as a tentative suggestion. The key to transcending this pattern lies in the conscious practice of a descending vocal inflection on your declarative statements. This entails allowing your voice to settle at the cessation of a sentence, rather than permitting it to ascend. Conceive of it as a firm landing for your words. When you articulate a fact, express an opinion, or present a request, allow your voice to descend naturally. For instance, rather than stating, "I am unable to undertake that additional project at this juncture," voice rises, endeavor to articulate, "I am unable to undertake that additional project at this juncture." Voice descends. The distinction is subtle, yet the impact is profound. The downward inflection conveys assurance, conviction, and finality. It communicates that a decision has been reached, that your stance is unwavering, and that your statement is not subject to debate. The initial stages of practicing this can feel incongruous. You might perceive yourself as sounding overly blunt or excessively demanding. However, remember that assertive communication is predicated on mutual respect, both for oneself and for others. A downward inflection on a statement is not an act of aggression, it is an act of clarity. It is simply the articulation of a fact or a resolution without the encumbrance of an unnecessary interrogative. It assists your listener in understanding that you are not seeking approbation, but rather stating your reality. It is about owning your words and your requirements. This command over your vocal pitch is an potent instrument for projecting presence and ensuring that your message is received with the gravity it warrants. Volume represents another critical determinant of vocal clarity. It is a delicate equilibrium. Speaking too softly can render you imperceptible. Your words may become lost, particularly in cacophonous environments or when the other party is speaking at a higher decibel. It can project timidity, hesitation, or a lack of conviction in your own pronouncements. Conversely, speaking too loudly can swiftly devolve into aggression. It can engender a sense of being attacked, prompting defensiveness and a withdrawal from engagement in the other person. It is akin to a barking chihuahua, a considerable output of noise, but not necessarily efficacious communication. The objective is to identify a resonant, audible volume that projects your presence without overwhelming. This necessitates speaking from your diaphragm, utilizing your breath to support your voice, rather than merely expelling air through your throat. When you possess robust breath support, your voice acquires a richer, fuller, and more commanding timbre, even at a moderate volume. Consider the projection of singers or public speakers. They harness their breath with considerable skill. To ascertain your optimal volume, take the context into consideration. In a tranquil office setting, a moderate, clear tone is generally sufficient. In a more chaotic milieu, you may need to project with slightly greater intensity. The paramount consideration is to be heard distinctly without resorting to shouting. When articulating a crucial point or establishing a boundary, a slight amplification of volume may naturally occur, but always with a measure of control. When actively listening or acknowledging a statement made by another, a subtle reduction in volume can signal attentiveness. This modulation of volume, this capacity to adjust your vocal power, demonstrates your command of the discourse and your own delivery. It is about projecting strength and self-assurance, not belligerence. It is about ensuring your voice is both heard and understood, and ultimately, respected. Finally, let us address the often underestimated potency of the pause. In our perpetually accelerating world, silence can evoke discomfort, even unease. We frequently feel compelled to fill every interstitial moment with sound, to maintain the conversational momentum, and to avert any intimation of a lull. However, strategic pauses are not voids to be gratuitously filled. They are deliberate intervals that can profoundly augment your communication. Regard a pause as a punctuation mark for your spoken word. Just as a comma signifies a minor caesura and a period denotes a definitive cessation, a judiciously placed pause can draw attention to what has preceded it, or prepare your listener for what is to follow. When confronted with a challenging question, rather than impulsively offering an immediate response, draw a breath and pause. This pause signals that you are engaged in cognitive processing, that you are deliberating your reply, and that you will not be coerced into an immediate answer. It affords you the mental latitude requisite for formulating a considered rejoinder. Pauses can also be employed to accentuate pivotal points. If you have just imparted a critical piece of information or articulated a significant assertion, a brief pause thereafter allows that information to be fully absorbed. It grants your listener the temporal space to apprehend its import. It is akin to allowing a resonant musical chord to linger in the air for a moment before the subsequent note is introduced. This deliberate silence can possess greater impact than the addition of further verbiage. It underscores the significance of what has just been conveyed. Furthermore, pauses can serve as a formidable instrument for reasserting control over a dialogue. If an individual is speaking with excessive speed, interrupting, or diverting the conversation along an unproductive trajectory, a well-timed pause can disrupt their momentum. It can create an opening for you to interject and recalibrate the conversational flow. For instance, if your supervisor is rapidly enumerating a series of demands, you might inhale deeply and pause once they have concluded. This pause can create an aperture for you to state, "I comprehend that you have numerous priorities. To ensure I can address these effectively, might we proceed through them sequentially?" The pause, in this context, is not a passive act. It is an active strategy for managing the dynamics of communication. The mastery of these vocal techniques, the control of your pace, the modulation of your pitch, the projection of your voice with resonance, and the judicious utilization of strategic pauses, forms the bedrock of assertive communication. They transmute your voice from a potential betrayer of your intentions into your most formidable asset. When you can speak at a controlled tempo, employ a steady, descending inflection on your declarations, project your voice with unwavering confidence, and leverage pauses with efficacy, you are audibly demonstrating your internal equilibrium. You are conveying that you are not a mere barking chihuahua or a subservient people pleaser, but an individual who is composed, lucid, and in command. This vocal proficiency is the audible manifestation of your capacity to navigate challenging dialogues with poise and purpose. It lays the groundwork for the subsequent, indispensable phase, ensuring that the substance of your message is as clear and impactful as its delivery. 5. Understanding people-pleasing behaviors. It is a common misconception to conflate genuine kindness with the ingrained habit of people-pleasing. We often fall into the trap of believing that by being agreeable, by readily assenting to every request, and by meticulously avoiding any disruption, we are navigating social interactions with grace. In the crucible of difficult conversations, this approach can feel like the most secure harbor. The desire to be liked, the aversion to conflict, and the profound wish to avoid any displeasure from others all conspire to push us toward this path. But what if this well-intentioned strategy is, in fact, a subtle form of self-sabotage, actively hindering your progress and exacerbating the very challenges you seek to circumvent? People-pleasing transcends mere pleasantries. It is a deeply entrenched behavioral pattern characterized by the consistent prioritization of others' needs, desires, and feelings above your own. It manifests when you find yourself uttering yes when your inner voice screams no, when you commit to tasks that stretch your capacity to its breaking point, or when you subtly alter your opinions to mirror those around you. This is not an act of benevolence. It is a relentless pursuit of external validation. Often, it is a learned response, a survival mechanism honed to navigate the world and secure a sense of belonging. Reflect for a moment. Have you ever agreed to something with a practiced smile, only to be consumed by a gnawing dread moments later? Have you ever offered profuse apologies for circumstances entirely beyond your control, simply to quell any potential discord? These are the telltale signs. True helpfulness springs from a place of conscious choice and balanced equilibrium. People-pleasing, conversely, originates from a wellspring of anxiety, a perpetual quest for affirmation, a deep-seated compulsion to be perceived as good, helpful, and non-threatening. At its core, people-pleasing is often fueled by fear. It is the dread of disapproval, the terror of rejection, the visceral aversion to confrontation. We harbor the anxious conviction that expressing our authentic thoughts or feelings, or daring to decline a request, will inevitably provoke anger, disappointment, or even outright ostracization. This fear can exert a formidable influence, whispering insidious directives to remain silent, to conform, to ensure the happiness of others at the expense of your own inner peace. This fear propels a ceaseless quest for approval, compelling us to scrutinize others' reactions as the sole arbiters of our adequacy. Our sense of self-worth becomes inextricably bound to the measure of others' regard. This pattern of behavior surfaces with striking clarity during difficult conversations. These are the subtle indicators that may be undermining your capacity for assertive communication, even when you believe you are employing your utmost effort. Let us examine how this fear and the craving for validation can distort our exchanges. One of the most revealing indicators lies within the very cadence of our voice. When engaged in people-pleasing, our vocalizations often betray our internal unease. You may notice a tendency for your voice to ascend at the conclusion of sentences, transforming declarative statements into tentative inquiries. For instance, instead of confidently stating, "I can deliver that report by Friday," you might inadvertently utter, "I can deliver that report by Friday." This upward inflection signals uncertainty, a subtle plea for reassurance that your response is acceptable, that you have navigated that interaction without misstep. It is akin to asking, "Is that permissible? Did I articulate that correctly?" This vocal cue, this rising inflection, is deeply rooted in the apprehension of conflict. When we fear upsetting others or encountering resistance, our vocal patterns instinctively shift. We unconsciously endeavor to soften our message, to render it less assertive, less demanding. The listener, though perhaps not consciously aware of the mechanism, perceives this subtle alteration. They may interpret it as a lack of confidence, a wavering self-assurance, or even diminished capability. This can inadvertently invite further scrutiny, more persistent demands, or the impression that your contribution lacks the solidity it deserves. The psychological impact on the listener is subtle yet profound, fostering an imbalance where they feel more empowered, and you less so. They may feel less compelled to accord your statement the weight of a firm commitment. Another vocal manifestation of people-pleasing is the tendency to speak with undue haste. In an effort to expedite a difficult conversation and escape prolonged discomfort, one might rush through their words, as if attempting to flee the situation. Conversely, some individuals may speak with excessive softness, as though hesitant to occupy too much space or generate undue noise. Their voice might be barely audible, further diminishing their presence and the impact of their pronouncements. Beyond the nuances of vocal delivery, other subtle verbal and non-verbal cues come into play. You might find yourself habitually over-apologizing. "I'm so sorry to bother you," or "I'm terribly sorry, but I need to." Inquire even when the request is entirely reasonable. The word just can become a ubiquitous companion. I just wanted to check in, or I just have a quick question. These linguistic qualifiers serve to diminish your request, rendering it seemingly less significant, less demanding. You may also assent too readily, nodding in agreement and offering a swift yes without genuine consideration of your capacity or your own perspective. Deflecting compliments is another common characteristic. When your work is lauded, you might dismiss it with, "Oh, it was nothing," or "anyone could have done it." This stems from an ingrained discomfort with positive attention, as if you deem yourself undeserving or fear making others feel inadequate. Furthermore, there is the inclination to assume blame that is not rightfully yours. In a collaborative endeavor, should something falter, you might be the first to declare, "It was my fault," even if your involvement was minimal or non-existent. This represents a desperate attempt to appease, to deflect scrutiny from others, and to preserve a favorable image. Non-verbally, people-pleasing can manifest as fidgeting, a reluctance to meet another's gaze, or the adoption of a defensive posture, such as crossing one's arms. You might even find yourself presenting a forced smile, a veneer designed to conceal your true sentiments and project an image of agreeableness. These signals, when combined with the vocal cues, construct a narrative for the other person even if they cannot articulate its components. They sense your discomfort, your lack of firm conviction, and your underlying desire to circumvent conflict. While these behaviors may appear innocuous, even courteous, on the surface, the repercussions of people-pleasing are considerable. In the immediate term, it may seem effective. You avert an argument, receive a fleeting acknowledgement, and feel a temporary sense of acceptance. However, over the long haul, its impact is profoundly detrimental. It erodes your sense of self. When you consistently suppress your own needs and opinions, you begin to lose touch with your authentic identity and your genuine desires. This leads to resentment. You start to feel exploited, as though your efforts are consistently taken for granted. You bear the brunt of the labor, make all the concessions, and for what? It breeds burnout, as you perpetually expend energy attempting to manage others' perceptions and fulfill their demands, often at the severe expense of your own well-being. Your personal boundaries become indistinct, or worse, entirely absent. Anyone can solicit anything from you, and you will likely acquiesce. Crucially, people-pleasing acts as a formidable barrier to genuine connection. Authentic relationships are forged on the bedrock of honesty and mutual respect, not on the perpetual sacrifice of one individual's needs for another's. It cultivates an imbalance of power, positioning the people-pleaser in a perpetual state of giving, while the other person assumes the role of taking. This dynamic is inherently unhealthy for all parties involved, and within the context of difficult conversations, people-pleasing invariably leads to the failure to achieve your desired outcomes. Your preoccupation with not upsetting the other person prevents you from clearly articulating your needs, your aspirations, or your boundaries. You end up compromising on matters of personal importance, and your voice remains unheard. This stands in stark opposition to assertive communication, which champions respect for oneself and for others. Assertive communication empowers you to express your thoughts and feelings, and to request your needs, without causing harm to others. It is about embodying strength and clarity, akin to a calm, unwavering presence, rather than a yapping terrier or a wilting bloom. So, how does the fear of conflict specifically engender those vocal patterns, such as the rising inflection, that betray people-pleasing? It is a fascinating interplay. When we anticipate conflict, our nervous system enters a heightened state of alert. We instinctively seek to de-escalate, to present ourselves as less threatening. Our voice is a potent instrument in this endeavor. A lower, steadier tone can convey authority and confidence. A higher, wavering tone can suggest uncertainty and submission. By elevating our pitch, we are unconsciously attempting to communicate, "Please do not attack me. I pose no threat. I am merely striving to be agreeable." It is a primal instinct to soften our demeanor when we perceive a potential threat. The psychological impact on the listener is that they may subconsciously perceive us as less of an equal, more as someone whose opinions are easily swayed or whose boundaries are permeable. This can embolden them to exert greater pressure, pose more questions, or lodge more demands, as they sense a lack of firm resistance. They might think, this person isn't truly confident in their stance, so perhaps I can persuade them to do as I wish. Beyond the overt yes or no, what are the subtle verbal and non-verbal cues that a reader might exhibit during a difficult conversation, signaling an unconscious inclination toward people-pleasing, even if they believe they are communicating assertively? This is where genuine self-awareness becomes paramount. It extends beyond merely avoiding a yes when one means no. It involves recognizing the smaller, habitual patterns. Are you engaged in perpetual nodding even when confused or internally disagreeing? Do you employ an excessive number of filler words such as or like, not as natural pauses, but because you are struggling to formulate non-confrontational language? Do you find yourself prefacing your statements with phrases like, I don't mean to be difficult, or this might be a silly question, but such introductions immediately place you on the defensive and signal an expectation that your contribution will be perceived as problematic. Consider your body language. Are you physically leaning away from the other person, creating distance as if seeking an escape? Or are you leaning in excessively, almost contorting yourself to appear agreeable and attentive? Are your shoulders hunched, as if attempting to diminish your physical presence? Do you find yourself smiling nervously, even when the subject matter is serious or fraught with difficulty? These are all subconscious signals that you are prioritizing the other person's comfort above your own imperative to communicate effectively and with conviction. Even if you are attempting to articulate a boundary, if you do so with a trembling voice, averted gaze, and a forced smile, the message being conveyed is one of hesitancy and a lack of resolve. The listener may register your words, but they will perceive your unease, and that unease can undermine the very strength of your message. Recognizing these ingrained people-pleasing tendencies constitutes the critical initial step. It is akin to illuminating a shadowed corner of your communication habits. However, mere identification is insufficient. The subsequent, vital phase in mastering difficult conversations involves comprehending the other side of the interaction, the challenging individuals themselves, and the specific communication tactics they frequently employ to orchestrate these uncomfortable dynamics. Only then can we truly begin to fortify our defenses and cultivate our own assertive voice. Chapter 2. Building Confidence in Communication. 1. The power of tone and pace. When confronted with attempts at coercion, particularly in the professional arena, individuals often resort to an accelerated cadence of speech. Consider a demanding supervisor. They might unleash a barrage of questions, akin to a rapid-fire volley. Have you finalized that report? What about the client correspondence? Have you reviewed the budgetary figures? Why has this not yet been completed? This relentless tempo is not merely a mechanism for information retrieval, it is a calculated stratagem. Its design is to induce discomposure, to precipitate mental disarray, and to impede cogent thought. It is as though they are endeavoring to conjure a tempest around you, with the hope that you will be swept away and acquiesce to any demand simply to quell the storm. This is their method of maintaining dominion. They desire for you to feel harried, a degree of apprehension, and perhaps even a twinge of culpability, thereby diminishing your inclination to assert your position or request additional time. This is precisely where the potency of your vocal expression truly distinguishes itself. The most efficacious countermeasure to this overwhelming velocity is to deliberately modulate your own response to a more measured rhythm. Envision yourself caught within that vortex. Instead of accelerating your own spin to keep pace, you elect to remain resolute. You inhale deeply. You choose to address each query, or even simply to acknowledge its receipt, at your own considered pace. This is not an exhibition of sluggishness or an unwillingness to cooperate. It is a strategic interlude. It functions as a mental pause button for both yourself and the speaker. By decelerating, you afford yourself invaluable moments for reflection. You can then ascertain the true import of their inquiry, rather than merely reacting to its velocity. And, remarkably, this often prompts the other individual to decelerate as well. They may not even recognize the precipitous nature of their own discourse until you establish this interstice. This deliberate slowness conveys that you are not succumbing to intimidation. You retain command of your own reaction, and therein lies a potent declaration. It communicates, I acknowledge your words, but I shall respond when I am prepared, and my response will be considered. Now let us turn our attention to the very timbre of our voices. Have you ever observed how certain individuals' voices ascend at the conclusion of a declarative statement, even when articulating a factual assertion? It can sound as though they are posing a question, seeking tacit approval, or perhaps even offering an apology for their utterance. This phenomenon is frequently termed a rising inflection. It is a prevalent habit, particularly among those inclined towards conciliation or conflict avoidance. It can render one's pronouncements uncertain, hesitant, or lacking in conviction. It is akin to articulating, "Is this acceptable? Am I causing inconvenience? Please do not be displeased with me." This vocal tendency can inadvertently invite further pressure. If your intonation suggests a plea for validation, the interlocutor may feel more emboldened to press their advantage. The antithesis of this rising inflection is the downward inflection. This occurs when one's voice naturally descends at the close of a statement. It conveys an impression of assurance, firmness, and finality. Consider the pronouncement of a judge in a courtroom, guilty. The intonation is definitive. When you employ a downward inflection, you are signaling that you are making a declaration, articulating a resolution, or stating a fact with unwavering certitude. It communicates, "This is my perspective. This is what I require. This is the prevailing circumstance." It is an unambiguous emblem of assertiveness. To amplify this effect, we can introduce what I term a hump. This is not a literal protuberance, of course. It is a subtle, intentional pause or a nuanced modulation of tone immediately preceding the conclusion of your sentence, leading into that downward inflection. It serves as a minor emphasis that draws attention to your statement and imbues it with a greater sense of deliberation. For instance, if your supervisor expedites a request with, "Can you complete this by tomorrow?" a conciliator might respond, "I'll endeavor my utmost, I suppose," with an upward lilt. An assertive communicator, conversely, might inhale, pause briefly, and declare, "I can finalize it by Wednesday." The brief interlude preceding Wednesday functions as that diminutive hump, grounding the factual assertion and rendering it deliberate. It is not an act of aggression, it is simply clarity and resoluteness. The hump and the downward inflection operate in concert. The pause cultivates an element of anticipation, and the descending tone delivers the message with authority. It is akin to demarcating a definitive boundary. It assists in establishing your personal parameters and articulating your necessities without recourse to apology. This confluence represents your assertive signature. It is the sonic manifestation of an individual who comprehends their desires and possesses the fortitude to articulate them with clarity and equanimity. Your vocal intonation is an instrument of remarkable adaptability. It can function as a bulwark, safeguarding you from facile manipulation or attack, and it can also serve as a blade, cleaving through ambiguity and solidifying your stance. When confronted by an individual exhibiting aggressive or demanding behavior, the manner of your vocalization can either exacerbate the situation or contribute to its de-escalation. A shrill, anxious tone, for example, can evoke the image of a diminutive, yapping canine, a barking chihuahua. It is vociferous, high-pitched, and frequently perceived as reactive and somewhat desperate. While it may command attention, it rarely garners respect or achieves a propitious outcome. It can, in fact, incite the other party to escalate their own vocalizations. Conversely, a calm, measured, and firm tone projects an aura of composure and self-possession. Even when conveying an unwelcome message, such as declining an unreasonable request, a steady, grounded tone lends an impression of command. It suggests that you have thoroughly considered the matter and that your decision is well-founded. This particular vocal quality can effectively diffuse a tense atmosphere. It is akin to extending a cool, steadying hand during a heated exchange. This does not necessitate an absence of emotion, Rather, it signifies the judicious management of your feelings and the selection of a delivery that serves your objective. Consider the disparity between an individual shouting in anger and one speaking with quiet authority. The former may possess greater volume, but the latter often carries more weight. This is where the gorilla analogy proves beneficial. Not a charging, aggressive primate, but one that is powerful, grounded, and self-assured. The gorilla's presence is perceived not through frantic noise, but through its steady, potent bearing. Your voice, when employed with a calm, consistent tone, can exert a similar potent, grounding influence. It is about projecting strength from a locus of inner tranquility rather than from a state of panic or aggression. This tone acts as a shield because it does not invite the other individual to mirror your agitation. Instead, it can encourage them to reciprocate your calm demeanor. Many of us have cultivated habits of people-pleasing that are so deeply ingrained, we remain oblivious to their presence. These habits frequently manifest in our vocalizations. They are sonic indicators that betray a deficit in self-esteem or a profound apprehension of conflict. Recognizing these tendencies is the indispensable initial stride toward liberation from their dominion. When you are perpetually striving to appease others, your voice may exhibit certain specific characteristics. You might find yourself employing a profusion of ums and uhs. These are Lacanian speech that can convey uncertainty and suggest a struggle to articulate the appropriate sentiment, or perhaps the least objectionable one. You might speak with undue haste, eager to complete your utterance before an interruption occurs or before you inadvertently express something objectionable. Your tone may be excessively apologetic, even in the absence of any transgression on your part. And, as previously discussed, that rising inflection at the conclusion of sentences is a significant telltale sign. When you detect these vocal cues within yourself, it is not a moment for self-recrimination. It is an occasion for heightened awareness. It is akin to discerning a pattern previously unobserved. The encouraging news is that these are acquired behaviors, and acquired behaviors can be unlearned and supplanted by more effective ones. Mastering your tone and cadence is fundamentally an act of reclaiming your voice. It involves recognizing that you possess the inherent right to be heard, to articulate your thoughts and emotions, and to request what you require without causing harm or exhibiting disrespect. It is an exercise in self-advocacy. It is not about adopting an aggressive or impolite demeanor. It is about discovering that felicitous middle ground, that assertive space, where you can be both resolute and clear yet also respectful. So, how do we concretely achieve this? How do we transition from theoretical comprehension to the practical application of these techniques when our supervisor is exerting pressure, or a difficult colleague is cornering us? It necessitates practice, and it demands conscious exertion, particularly when you are experiencing duress. The inaugural step is self-awareness. Commence by scrutinizing your own vocalizations. Record your conversations, even if it initially feels awkward. Attend to your pace. Are you rushing? Are you pausing? Observe your tone. Does it ascend at the end of sentences when you are stating a fact? Does it sound anxious or apologetic? You can even engage in practice in low-stakes scenarios. The next time you order a beverage, endeavor to articulate your request with a clear, downward inflection and a steady rhythm. Note the sensation it evokes. When you find yourself engaged in a challenging discourse, and you perceive that familiar inclination to accelerate or to elevate your voice at the conclusion of your statements, consciously interrupt that impulse. Inhale deeply. Prior to responding to an expeditious query, pause for a beat. You can even articulate, "Allow me a moment to consider that." This pauses your ally. It provides the necessary space to select your response. Then, when you do speak, aim for that steady, grounded tone. Envision yourself addressing a confidant who requires clear, composed counsel. Your voice does not need to be loud to be impactful. It needs to be clear, steady, and deliberate. Let us examine the physiological and psychological dimensions of this phenomenon. When an individual speaks with rapidity and aggression, they are frequently endeavoring to trigger your stress response. This can lead to an elevated heart rate, shallow respiration, and a racing mind. Your body is preparing for a confrontation or an evasion. In this state, your voice naturally tends to become higher and more rapid. By consciously decelerating your pace and lowering your tone, you are, in essence, transmitting a signal to your own brain that you are not in peril. This can contribute to the calming of your nervous system. Concurrently, you are disrupting the other individual's strategy. Their rapid cadence is designed to overwhelm your cognitive faculties. When you decelerate, you compel them to re-engage their own thought processes. They are obliged to await your reply. This pause can disrupt their momentum and afford them an opportunity to contemplate your perspective or the ramifications of their own demands. It shifts the dynamic from an interrogation to a dialogue, however brief. The downward inflection, in particular, signifies finality and conviction. It is not as amenable to debate as a question is. This can prompt the other individual to pause and consider your pronouncements with greater gravity. They are less likely to perceive you as someone they can easily subjugate. Practicing these modulations under duress represents the true challenge. It is analogous to athletic training. You do not simply appear and expect to prevail. You engage in drills. For communication, the drills involve the deliberate selection of your pace and tone in quotidian interactions. When someone poses a simple question, practice responding with a clear, downward inflection. When you feel a degree of haste, practice taking a deliberate breath before you speak. The more you practice these minor instances, the more they will become second nature. You can also employ visualization. Prior to an encounter that may prove challenging, envision yourself speaking with composure and clarity. Picture your voice as steady and your pace as controlled. This mental rehearsal can prepare your brain and body for the desired response. Bear in mind, the objective is not to become robotic or to suppress your emotions. It is about channeling your emotions constructively. It is about utilizing your voice as an instrument for clear, confident communication. By mastering your tone and pace, you are not merely learning to speak differently, you are learning to think differently, to feel differently, and ultimately, to act differently in challenging circumstances. You are discovering your voice, not by amplifying your volume, but by speaking with intention and control. Having elucidated the profound influence of how we articulate our sentiments, the subsequent critical phase in navigating difficult conversations necessitates an understanding of the underlying mental constructs that shape our readiness to speak forth. We have acquired mastery over our vocal apparatus, now we must fortify our mindset. 2. Strategies for self-advocacy. When faced with relentless questioning, insistent demands, or the pressure of urgent requests, one can easily feel ensnared in a tempest. The mind races, and before conscious thought can intervene, you find yourself conceding to unwanted obligations or uttering words you later lament. It is akin to being harried by a pack of baying hounds with the sole desire for the cacophony to cease. This is precisely where the potent force of self-advocacy emerges. It is the art of standing firm, articulating your own needs, and ensuring your feelings and requirements are acknowledged and honored, all without resorting to aggression or succumbing to timidity. Consider that disquieting sensation when a demanding superior or an insistent purveyor of goods bombards you with a barrage of inquiries. They might press, has the report been finalized? What is the status of the budget? When can we anticipate the client presentation? Have you consulted legal regarding the contract? Pray tell, why is this endeavor protracted? To attempt to address each query as it arises at the same breakneck tempo can render you flustered, bewildered, and perhaps even a touch desperate. Your voice may accelerate, its pitch ascending, creating the impression that you are seeking permission even to articulate a thought. This is the antithesis of our objective. It is here that the inaugural cornerstone of self-advocacy makes its entrance, the mastery of deliberate pauses and measured cadence. When one is assailed by a rapid-fire interrogation, the primal instinct is to mirror the aggressor's velocity. Yet, this is precisely the anticipated reaction, and it frequently culminates in a reactive rather than a considered response. Instead, envision yourself possessing an arcane instrument, a pause button. As the questions begin to cascade, consciously elect to decelerate your own vocal delivery. Inhale deeply. Allow a subtle, intentional silence to linger in the air before you respond. This is not an act of incivility nor a disingenuous ploy to gain time. It is the reclamation of dominion over the conversation's tempo. By slowing your pace, you accomplish several profound feats. Foremost, you forge a sanctuary for your own cognitive processes. That ephemeral second or two grants you the latitude to truly apprehend the question, to retrieve pertinent facts, and to construct a lucid, veracious answer. You are not merely reacting, you are responding with intention. Secondly, by tempering your cadence, you subtly disrupt the interrogator's momentum. They are accustomed to your reciprocal haste. When you deviate from this pattern, it can prompt them to pause and reflect. What is transpiring? It is akin to applying a gentle yet resolute hand to a runaway train. This alteration in rhythm can, in fact, de-escalate the situation. It communicates, without the utterance of a single word, that you are in command of yourself, and consequently, you are in command of the exchange. You are not a compliant automaton susceptible to being swept away by their urgency. You are a steadfast presence. Revisit the scenario with the exacting manager. Instead of a hurried yes, I am attending to it, the budget is nearly complete, the presentation will be ready by Friday, and I shall contact legal immediately thereafter. You might pause after their initial inquiry. Draw a breath. Then with an even tone articulate, allow me to address that. The report is progressing as scheduled for completion by the close of business today. Then pause once more. Subsequently, concerning the budget, I am presently finalizing those figures and anticipate their availability by tomorrow morning. You are providing answers, but you are doing so on your own terms, at your own measured pace. This deliberate deceleration projects an aura of quiet assurance. It signifies thoughtfulness and control rather than being overwhelmed. It is a subtle yet remarkably efficacious method of asserting your presence and precluding being cornered. This leads us to the second indispensable strategy, cultivating vocal tonality that conveys authority, not entreaty. Have you ever observed how, when feeling uncertain or striving for excessive politeness, your voice tends to ascend at the conclusion of a statement? It transforms a declaration into a query even when presenting a factual assertion. For instance, I can accomplish that for you? Or this represents the optimal approach? This upward inflection is a quintessential marker of seeking affirmation or betraying doubt. It is frequently a learned behavior, adopted when attempting to appease others or sidestep discord. For the purposes of self-advocacy, we must invert this tendency. Our voice should emanate certainty, clarity, and conviction. This necessitates aiming for a descending or steady inflection at the end of your sentences. Rather than I can accomplish that for you, opt for a firm, unwavering I can accomplish that for you. Instead of this represents the optimal approach? State with a clear, grounded timbre, this represents the optimal approach. This is not an exhortation to be strident or belligerent. It pertains to the inherent quality of your voice. Perceive the divergence between a voice tinged with nervousness and a voice that is calm and resonant. The latter commands greater credibility, possesses more inherent power, and projects a superior sense of control. To cultivate this, practice speaking at a pitch slightly lower than your customary conversational tone. Feel the resonance emanating from your chest, not merely your throat. When articulating a fact, lodging a request, or establishing a boundary, allow your voice to settle at the sentence's conclusion. Envision yourself as a venerable storyteller whose deep, steady voice commands rapt attention by virtue of its profound self-assurance. When you speak with a consistent, descending inflection, you communicate that you are presenting facts, expressing your needs, or making a definitive request. You are not soliciting permission to possess these needs or to articulate these facts. You are presenting them as integral components of the situation's reality. This vocal characteristic signals to the other party that you are not seeking their acquiescence. You are stating your position. It is a formidable means of asserting your presence and ensuring that your pronouncements are accorded due weight. It propels you away from the people-pleaser cadence and towards the gorilla of serene fortitude. The third strategy centers on defining and articulating boundaries with unwavering clarity. Self-advocacy is, At its core, the capacity to comprehend your limitations and to communicate them effectively. This entails explicitly stating what you are willing and able to undertake, and what falls beyond your purview. It is the act of drawing an unequivocal line. We frequently observe individuals oscillating between two extremes, the yapping terrier and the accommodating supplicant. The terrier is overtly aggressive. They may resort to shouting, disparagement, or outbursts when their boundaries are transgressed. While this may capture attention, it invariably corrodes relationships and elicits defensiveness. The accommodating supplicant, conversely, shuns conflict at all costs. They assent when they intend to demur, they overcommit, and they permit others to exploit them. Their voice may ascend at the close of sentences, and they frequently offer profuse apologies. Assertive communication, the gorilla in our metaphor, occupies the judicious middle ground. It is characterized by strength and clarity, tempered by calmness and respect. It entails the ability to decline when necessary, to articulate your capacity, or to redirect a conversation that induces discomfort. For instance, if your manager proposes a project that you recognize will overburden you, rather than responding with "Oh, certainly, I shall endeavor my utmost." The supplicant, "Or are you jesting? I am already submerged." The terrier, you can employ assertive communication. You might state, "I comprehend the significance of this project. However, my current workload is at its absolute limit. I can undertake this if we assign it the highest priority, which would necessitate deferring another project. Alternatively, I can assist in identifying an individual with the requisite capacity to manage this effectively at present." Observe how this response is direct, accurately reflects your circumstances, and proffers solutions. It does not apologize for your capacity, nor does it confront the inquirer. It is a lucid declaration of your boundaries, delivered with a steady voice and a composed demeanor. Communicating boundaries is not an exercise in obstinacy. It is an affirmation of realism and self-respect. It is the recognition that you possess the inherent right to govern your time, energy, and commitments. When you articulate your boundaries with precision, you implicitly instruct others on how to engage with you. You establish expectations that are equitable and sustainable for all parties involved. This constitutes a fundamental tenet of assertive communication, honoring oneself by articulating one's needs and limitations, and honoring others by doing so with grace and lucidity. Finally, self-advocacy necessitates a pivotal internal metamorphosis, the transition from "why me?" to "how can I?" When confronted with recalcitrant individuals or arduous circumstances, our innate inclination can be to adopt a victimized stance. We might ponder, "Why does this perpetually befall me?" Or "This is profoundly unjust." Such a mindset can engender a sense of powerlessness and simmering resentment. Assertive communication demands that we transcend this victim mentality. Rather than fixating on the inequity of the situation, we must redirect our focus to that which we can influence. Our response. This entails posing the questions, "How can I respond effectively to this?" Or "How can I articulate my needs in this present moment?" Or "What is the most assertive course of action I can adopt in this scenario?" This cognitive recalibration is transformative. It elevates you from a passive spectator of your own existence to an active protagonist. When you inquire "Why me?" you remain ensnared by the problem. When you ask "How can I?" you are actively seeking resolutions. This proactive orientation empowers you. It serves as a potent reminder that even amidst challenging dialogues, you retain agency. You possess the capacity to select your words, your tone, and your actions. Imagine a colleague who consistently offloads their less desirable assignments onto you. Your initial reaction might be, "This is utterly unfair. They always foist the drudgery upon me." This "why me?" perspective can foster latent resentment and passive-aggressive conduct. However, if you reframe it as "How can I communicate that this arrangement is untenable for me?" you can approach the situation with a different lens. You might plan to initiate a conversation wherein you calmly elucidate your own workload and responsibilities, and perhaps propose a more equitable distribution of tasks. The focus shifts from lamenting the predicament to actively pursuing a resolution. This internal reframing serves as the bedrock upon which our external communication strategies are constructed. It is the mental preparation that enables us to deploy a measured pace, a steady tone, and unambiguous boundaries with efficacy. Absent this internal shift toward empowerment, even the most refined communication techniques may feel hollow or artificial. To truly master self-advocacy, we must integrate these strategies. We must diligently practice slowing our speech and employing pauses. We must refine our vocal tonality, striving for steadiness and clarity. We must become adept at defining and articulating our boundaries with both respect and firmness. And crucially, we must cultivate an internal disposition that prioritizes proactive problem-solving over passive victimhood. These are not mere techniques, they represent fundamental shifts in our approach to challenging interactions, enabling us to discover our voice and assert our presence with both confidence and integrity. Having delved into these foundational strategies for self-advocacy, mastering pace, tonality, and the precise articulation of boundaries, we have established the essential framework for confidently projecting your voice. The subsequent, indispensable phase involves comprehending how to consistently apply these principles even when the perceived risks are substantial, by cultivating a resilient internal architecture for managing your emotional responses and preserving your equanimity. 3. Becoming assertive without aggression. Confidence in communication is not a matter of volume, but of conviction. It is the quiet certainty of knowing your own mind and articulating it with profound respect, both for yourself and for those with whom you engage. It is the self-assurance to share your thoughts, your emotions, and your needs without encroaching upon the space of another. This chapter is dedicated to cultivating that inner fortitude, that serene strength that empowers you to sculpt the contours of conversation rather than merely being carried along by its currents. When confronting challenging dialogues, particularly with individuals inclined towards demanding or overbearing behavior, the instinct often bifurcates, to recede into silence or to erupt in defiance. Yet, a more potent and enduring path exists, one that genuinely yields results. This is the domain of assertive communication, the very essence of discovering and wielding your authentic voice. Cultivating assertiveness without succumbing to aggression. A pervasive apprehension exists that the pursuit of assertiveness will inevitably transmute into aggression. Many envision themselves as a diminutive, yapping terrier, all frantic snaps and incessant noise, or perhaps a hulking ape, wielding only brute force and intimidation. The reality, however, is that assertiveness embodies none of these caricatures. It is a balanced, potent mode of being that honors the inherent worth of all involved. Consider the metaphor of a road. On one verge lies the perilous ditch of passivity, where you permit others to trample your boundaries, acquiescing when you inwardly dissent, uttering yes when your spirit cries no, and allowing your own needs and feelings to be systematically disregarded. You become, in essence, a doormat. On the opposing verge is the precipice of aggression, where you impose your needs and feelings upon others, often with a destructive and disrespectful force. This manifests as interruption, raised voices, or peremptory demands, devoid of any consideration for the other's perspective. This is the realm of the barking chihuahua. While aggression may offer a fleeting sense of immediate gratification, its repercussions are invariably detrimental, fostering defensiveness, resentment, and a profound unwillingness to engage. Assertive communication, conversely, represents the smooth, unblemished thoroughfare precisely in the middle of this perilous road. It is characterized by directness, honesty, and clarity in expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs, all while demonstrating a profound respect for the rights and emotions of the other party. You can champion your own cause without diminishing another. You can decline a request without succumbing to guilt. You can articulate a disagreement without igniting a conflagration. It is the art of discovering your own resonant, tranquil voice. The imperative of eschewing aggression cannot be overstated. While aggression may elicit an immediate response, it is rarely a constructive one. Envision a superior who bombards you with rapid-fire inquiries. If you respond with defensiveness, perhaps a sharp retort, or an exasperated outburst, what is the likely outcome? Your superior will likely become defensive, withdraw, or even retaliate. The conversation devolves from a problem-solving endeavor into a contest of wills. You might experience a transient surge of power, but in the long term, you risk damaging the relationship and impeding your future ability to achieve your objectives. Aggression erects barriers. Assertiveness constructs bridges. This is precisely where the nuanced application of your voice becomes paramount. The transcript alluded to the control of your frequency and the eradication of the hump, that upward inflection at the conclusion of sentences. When subjected to a rapid barrage of questions, the natural inclination is to accelerate your own responses, attempting to match the pace. However, if you succumb to this impulse, and your voice ascends at the end of your statements, it can betray an underlying uncertainty, as if seeking permission to speak or signaling a state of disarray. It projects the image of a people-pleaser striving for amiable compliance. Instead, the counsel is to deliberately decelerate your cadence. When responding to inquiries, pause, inhale, and speak at a pace slightly slower than your customary rhythm. Crucially, allow your voice to descend to a steady, grounded tone. Perceive it as a declarative statement of conviction, not a tentative question. For instance, if a demanding superior inquires, "Did you finish the report? Why is it late? What are you going to do about it?" Rather than rushing through your answers with an upward lilt, you might pause briefly and articulate, "I am completing the report. It will be delivered to you by specific time." Observe the impact of this delivery. It is unambiguous, direct, and effectively preempts further immediate pressure. The measured pace and steady tone signal a command of yourself and the situation, even when confronted with external haste. This is not an indication of slow wit, but rather of deliberate composure and self-possession. This meticulously controlled vocal delivery serves as a potent declaration. "I have heard you, I am responding thoughtfully, and I will not be precipitated into an ill-considered answer." It is a non-aggressive assertion of your presence and your cognitive process. Beyond the sonic quality of your delivery, the very substance of your communication is integral to assertive, non-aggressive engagement. A profoundly effective technique involves the utilization of I statements. These are declarations that pivot on your personal feelings, thoughts, and experiences, thereby circumventing the accusatory tone that can alienate and provoke defensiveness. For example, instead of stating, "You always burden me with excessive work, and it causes me immense stress," which carries an unmistakable accusatory charge, consider this I statement: "I feel overwhelmed when I am assigned multiple urgent tasks simultaneously, as it impedes my ability to dedicate the requisite attention to each." Can you discern the divergence? Thy statement articulates your subjective experience and the impact of a given circumstance upon you. It refrains from assigning blame. It thereby creates an opening for dialogue and collaborative problem-solving. It is considerably more challenging for another to dispute the authenticity of your feelings. This approach facilitates the clear communication of your needs and boundaries. For instance, if you are requested to undertake an additional project when your current workload is already at its zenith, you might respond, "I recognize the importance of this undertaking. Currently, my focus is on completing current urgent task. I can assume responsibility for this new project upon its conclusion, or perhaps we could collaboratively determine which task warrants immediate prioritization." This is the embodiment of assertiveness. You are articulating your present capacity and proposing viable solutions rather than simply issuing a flat no, which can feel passive or an aggressive declaration of impossibility. The process of recognizing and relinquishing people-pleasing tendencies is a significant facet of this transformative journey. We often fall into the patterns of people-pleasing without conscious awareness. That characteristic upward inflection at the close of our sentences is a telltale sign. It is a subtle upward trajectory that conveys, "Is this acceptable? Am I causing inconvenience? Please do not be displeased." It is a voice that seeks validation rather than asserting facts or needs. Other indicators include excessive apologies, agreeing with sentiments you do not genuinely hold simply to maintain harmony, or an absolute aversion to conflict, even at the expense of your own well-being. Let us consider a hypothetical scenario. Sarah, an administrative assistant in marketing, frequently found herself tasked by her manager, Mr. Davies, with responsibilities that extended beyond her defined role. Mr. Davies, a man of amiable disposition, was nonetheless perpetually pressed for time, prone to delegating tasks with considerable alacrity and minimal forethought. Sarah, eager to be perceived as helpful and a valuable team member, invariably acquiesced. Her vocal delivery, however, betrayed her underlying apprehension, with a pronounced upward inflection at the end of her pronouncements. "So Sarah, could you just give this entire proposal a quick proofread for me? It's for a major client." Sarah would respond, "Oh, yes, Mr. Davies, I can certainly do that, I think." The appended "I think" was the audible manifestation of her people-pleasing inclination, signaling her uncertainty and her fervent hope that she was not inadvertently creating a problem. One day, Sarah faced a critical deadline for a project of her own. Mr. Davies approached her desk, a sheaf of papers in hand. "Sarah, I need you to compile all these expense reports for me by the end of the day. It's urgent." Sarah experienced the familiar tightening of anxiety in her chest. She worried that a refusal would disappoint Mr. Davies. Conversely, accepting would jeopardize her own project. This presented an opportune moment to practice assertiveness. Abandoning her customary hurried, upward-inflected response, Sarah took a deliberate breath. She met Mr. Davies' gaze and articulated, in a voice that was both steady and calm, "Mr. Davies, I understand the urgency of these reports. I am presently engaged in the Q3 marketing analysis, which is due for submission tomorrow morning. My priority is to ensure I dedicate my full attention to its completion. I can assist with the expense report subsequent to finalizing my analysis, or perhaps we could discuss which task holds greater immediate priority for the company. Do you perceive the transformative difference?" Sarah did not resort to snapping or complaining. She did not exclaim, "I'm too busy," in an aggressive outburst. Nor did she offer a hesitant, "Oh, okay, I'll try my best." With that characteristic uncertain lilt, she employed an I statement to elucidate her current professional commitments. "I am presently engaged in." She clearly articulated her dedication to her existing task and its significance. Subsequently, she proposed viable alternatives. She could address the reports later, or they could jointly establish priorities. This is assertive communication in its most effective form. It demonstrates respect for her own workload and deadlines while maintaining a professional and solution-oriented demeanor. Mr. Davies, rather than feeling confronted, comprehended Sarah's predicament and was empowered to make an informed decision regarding priorities. He recognized the paramount importance of the marketing analysis and graciously arranged for another individual to manage the expense reports. Sarah experienced a profound sense of relief and a quiet, deeply satisfying accomplishment. She had discovered her voice, and it was neither a bark nor a whimper, but a clear, unwavering tone of self-respect. The subtle distinction between a confident downward inflection and a dismissive or condescending tone is of paramount importance. A confident tone is characterized by warmth, steadiness, and an unshakable grounding. It conveys an assuredness in one's pronouncements and a genuine respect for the listener. It is akin to stating, "This is what I know, and this is my perspective." Conversely, a dismissive or condescending tone often carries an undercurrent of superiority or impatience. It may subtly imply that the other party is misguided or that their concerns are of negligible consequence. While this can occasionally manifest as a downward inflection, it is typically accompanied by nonverbal cues such as eye-rolling, a sigh, or a sharp, clipped manner of speech. The crux of the matter lies in intention and execution. Assertiveness strives for mutual understanding and respect, even amidst disagreement. Aggression seeks dominance, victory, or belittlement. A controlled, steady voice that concludes on a downward note, delivered with sincere deference to the other individual, is the hallmark of assertiveness. It is about being firm, not harsh. It is about being clear, not condescending. The mastery of assertive communication, achieved through the conscious regulation of our pace and tone to circumvent people-pleasing and aggression, establishes the foundational framework for genuine confidence. However, true proficiency necessitates not only an internal metamorphosis, but also the courage to deploy these cultivated skills in real-time interactions. The subsequent section will delve into practical methodologies for preparing and initiating those pivotal, challenging conversations, ensuring that your newly acquired assertive voice resonates with efficacy when it matters most. Conclusion: you have traversed these pages, perhaps feeling that familiar clench of apprehension before a difficult conversation, or the sting of being steamrolled by an overbearing superior. It is likely you have found yourself uttering a reluctant yes when your heart screamed no, all in the pursuit of fragile peace. These are not isolated incidents, but common echoes of a struggle to wield our voice with potent clarity when it matters most. This book embarked with a singular pledge, that you possess the innate capacity to command your communication, particularly the resonance of your voice, thereby navigating challenging encounters with unwavering assurance. It is about transcending the paralysis of overwhelm and, in its stead, cultivating a presence that is both formidable and unassailable. At the heart of this expedition lies the embrace of assertive communication. Envision it as your personal arsenal for navigating the intricate terrain of dialogue. It is neither the strident clamor of aggression, akin to a yapping terrier, nor the timid retreat of perpetual acquiescence. Rather, it is the art of discovering that equilibrium, that potent middle ground. We have witnessed how a demanding superior can unleash a barrage of questions, sharp and rapid, leaving one feeling disoriented. Assertive communication equips you to respond with a different cadence, a more measured, deliberate rhythm that broadcasts your command, not your capitulation. It is the conscious decision to plant your feet firmly, rather than be swept away by the tempest. We delved into the profound impact of your voice's timbre and tempo, how they can articulate volumes before a single word is uttered. Recall the people pleaser, whose vocalizations often ascend at their conclusion, betraying an undercurrent of uncertainty. This stands in stark contrast to the assertive voice, characterized by a tone of resolute steadiness, perhaps even a subtle, downward inflection that signifies conviction and resolution. It is the bearing of a tranquil, powerful gorilla, not a shrill, barking Pomeranian. This is not about dominance. It is about dignity, the dignity of honoring your own needs and sentiments, and the dignity of extending that same respect to another, without inflicting gratuitous harm. The linchpin is intentionality. Instead of succumbing to automatic reaction, you learn to pause, to inhale, and to choose your response. This self-awareness is the genesis. Recognizing the subtle slide into appeasement or the surge of defensiveness is the inaugural step toward charting a more assertive course. Now, the true endeavor commences. These proficiencies are not mere fodder for contemplation. They are blueprints for living. The mastery of arduous conversations is akin to forging a muscle. It demands diligent, consistent practice. Perfection will elude you on occasion, and that is entirely permissible. Certain dialogues will still feel precarious, and some days, you may find yourself reverting to ingrained patterns. Perceive these moments not as setbacks, but as invaluable pedagogical opportunities. They illuminate the precise areas that warrant focused cultivation. Begin with the elemental. Experiment with a deliberate pause before responding to a straightforward query at work, or endeavor to maintain a steady vocalization when articulating a personal requirement. Each minor triumph fortifies your confidence and reinforces the salutary influence of assertive communication. As your practice deepens, you will observe a cascading effect. Your relationships will likely blossom, characterized by more clearly defined boundaries and a reciprocal respect. Colleagues may begin to perceive you through a new lens, not as an individual easily swayed, but as a competent and self-assured entity. Most profoundly, you will experience an intrinsic transformation. You will acquire a more robust sense of self-erection, cognizant of your capacity to sculpt your interactions and your surroundings. You are no longer a mere passenger in the crucible of difficult conversations. You are the navigator, steering with the power of your voice. Proceed, and allow your voice to resonate with unwavering clarity and unshakable confidence.